Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
The philosophy of Hannah Arendt.
Let's face facts. Let's be realists. All power ultimately is violence.
Her great works on revolution.
Violence does not promote causes, but it can indeed serve to dramatize grievances and to bring them to public attention.
The origins of totalitarianism.
In a fully developed bureaucracy, there's nobody left with whom one could argue, to whom one could present grievances, on whom the pressures of power could be exerted.
The human condition.
People realize that life is an unending contest, that violence is an element of life.
Why was Arendt so controversial?
That's a very good question.
From Germany to Paris to New York.
Hannah Arendt, coming up on Philosophy Talk, after the news.
Hi, I'm Josh Landy. Hannah Arendt was born on October 14, 1906. So please enjoy this vintage episode about her with John and Ken. Good thing it's still in human condition.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're coming to you from the studios of KALW in San Francisco.
Continuing conversations that begin at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus. The number you can call to join our conversation is 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917.
Today we're going to do another in our series of profiles on leading philosophers. This time our topic is one of the great political theorists of the 20th century, Hannah Arendt.
You know, Ken, all the philosophers we talk about here on Philosophy Talk have interesting thoughts, but many of them have pretty dull lives. Hannah Arendt was definitely not one of those. She led a very interesting life, and the events in her life had a lot to do with her philosophy.
Well, she certainly had fascinating ideas. She wrote about totalitarianism, the human condition, and fundamental issues in political theory. She wrote an influential book about the trial of the Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem, a book that made famous the phrase, the banality of evil. She died in the mid-1970s, so, the last part of her philosophical career, here's an important point, corresponds to the first part of mine. At the time, she was a leader of the New York intellectual scene, but I have to admit something, I don't really know how she got to be at the head of that scene.
Well, it's pretty interesting. Arendt was Jewish. She was born in Germany early in the century. She actually grew up in Königsberg, famous because it was Kant's hometown, at least famous to philosophers. In her 20s, she studied with Martin Heidegger, with whom she had an intense love affair. Then she went on to write her dissertation with Jaspers on Augustine.
Wait a minute, go back a second. I know that Heidegger was a great philosopher, but wasn't he also a Nazi? What's a young Jewish graduate student in Germany doing having an affair with a Nazi?
Well, Heidegger wasn't a Nazi then. He joined the party after Hitler's rise to power in the mid-30s when he was rector of the University of Freiburg. It was politically motivated, I think. But to get a bit ahead of our story, Arendt actually returned to Germany from New York in the early 50s when the occupation forces after the war were trying to decide what to do with Heidegger. Arendt's dealings with Heidegger before and after his Nazi period, by the way, are a topic of a recent very interesting play, Hannah and Martin.
So tell me a little bit about Arendt's life between her dissertation and the 50s.
Well, anti-Semitism and Nazism began to affect her in a big way in the late 20s and 30s. You know that in Germany, after you write your dissertation, you have to write another big book called the Habilitation, or Habilitation. She was prevented from doing that because she was Jewish, and that meant no chance of getting a job in Germany.
So I guess, obviously she managed to get out of Germany and to avoid the camps.
Well, just barely. She began to study anti-Semitism, which drew attention to her. She moved to Paris after being questioned by the Gestapo, which was a good idea. But of course, even there, the Germans invaded and things were difficult. She worked before the invasion to help Jewish refugees in Paris, and she actually spent some time in prison but escaped. In 1941, she made it to the U.S. She held a number of posts, finally becoming the first woman to be a full professor at Princeton in 1959. Hannah Arendt died in 1975.
So you can certainly see connections between her life, the story of her life, and her work. I mean, just look at the titles of some of her books, like The Origins of Totalitarianism. But John, you're an analytic philosopher, and so am I, and we're both philosophers of language. Have you really ever dug in much into the details, into the nuts and bolts of Arendt's philosophy?
Well, I do know that she preferred to be called a political theorist. I know that her books, nevertheless, were very philosophical, with all sorts of interesting ideas about the nature of action, of course, particularly political action. But you're right. I've led a dull life, consumed with dull ideas about the philosophy of language. I'm no expert on political philosophy or on Hannah Arendt. But luckily, our guest is Seyla Benhabib from Yale University.
And we'll start by asking Professor Benhabib to tell us more about Arendt's philosophy and political theory.
Then we'll examine a key concept of Arendt's philosophy, the concept of a public space for political discussion and action, exactly the sort of thing that totalitarian regimes eliminate.
Then we'll consider whether the internet gives us a new kind of public space, political space in Arendt's sense.
But first, our roving philosophical reporter, Julie Napolin, is going to dig into the background on Arendt a little bit more, including a bit from that play I mentioned, Hannah and Martin. She files this report.
Hannah Arendt tackles one of the most baffling questions in the history of philosophy. Who are you?
In The Human Condition, this is her book from 1958, she writes about the who somebody is versus the what they are.
Karen Feldman is assistant professor of German at UC Berkeley. She says for Arendt, there is no answer to that question.
What we are is how we define ourselves as a woman, as a Jew, as a vegetarian, all the different possible identifications we could offer. Who somebody is, she writes, is revealed in the kinds of things you say and do in a political vein, in a public sphere, among other free human beings.
My name is Melissa Friedman, and I am an actor and a founding artist of Epic Theater Ensemble, one of the artists who founded a theater company in New York City that is dedicated to placing theater at the center of civic dialogue.
Friedman incorporates Arendt's thoughts about public speech and action into her theater company.
It is a way to look at something from multiple perspectives, and you see it in a human form. Whereas in a book, you see it in your own mind, but when you see people on stage battling these questions, you have a chance to watch humans grapple.
In 2004, Epic Theater produced Hannah and Martin, a play conceived by Friedman and written by Kate Fodor. It's about the affair between Arendt and her mentor, Martin Heidegger, who later joined the Nazi Party.
November 7th, 1946. Dear Sir, I find myself in an awkward position of needing to correct certain damaging statements that I made to you regarding Professor Martin Heidegger.
After the war, Heidegger was not allowed to teach or publish. Arendt spoke out against him, then met with him in 1950, not having seen him since before the war.
Something in that meeting, she went there to confront him, but something in that meeting in Germany happened where she not only forgave him, but also was the reason he continued to be published and translated all over the world.
I think she wanted to rescue this talent of thinking that she believed he had for others, that this was part of the human world, as she believes the human world is the sum of the products that human beings make, and Heidegger's thought and his books, these are part of the human world.
The play takes us back to that moment with Heidegger. In the spirit of Arendt's work, the play directly engages us in a decision.
Well, Hitler has blood on his hands. And he shook hands with Himmler, who shook hands with the Minister of Education, who shook hands with Professor Martin Heidegger, who shook hands with me. I wonder, if the hand you take is one stretched out for help, what then? A sin to take it, or a sin to refuse?
There's nothing quite like such a compelling piece of theater, when you have something that well written. But then, probably equally as compelling is the story itself, which is really interesting, a story of forgiveness and a question about what we can forgive in our society, and politically speaking, like what are we allowing in the public forum?
I think for Arendt, it's not a matter of asking others to judge us, but rather it's a matter of us making judgments ourselves. I can imagine instead a more Arendtian version being to turn to the audience and say, do you have blood on your hands? Because it's not about them judging her in this instance. It's about learning to, as she writes famously, think without banisters, learning to think and judge for oneself.
For Philosophy Talk, I'm Julie Napolin.
I'm John Perry. Thanks, Julie. That was another Julie. Julie Queen is Hannah Arendt. With me is Ken Taylor.
And our guest today is Seyla Benhabib. She's a professor of political science and philosophy at Yale University. She's a very prolific and widely celebrated author. But for pertinent to our discussion today is her book, The Reluctant Modernism of Hannah Arendt. Seyla, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Hi, Ken. Hi, John. Good morning.
Thanks for joining us, Seyla. Now you've written on many things in political philosophy and in many figures, but how did you get particularly interested in Hannah Arendt?
Well, I discovered her in 1972 when I entered Yale Graduate School after having completed a degree in philosophy at Brandeis. And that fall, I remember encountering two of her books, The Origins of Totalitarianism and The Human Condition. Sometimes in philosophy you run into works. You're not understanding, let's say, more than half, and you're not getting it. But you have the sense that the book is speaking to you, was almost written for you, and it is so deep, and you're just completely compelled by it. And for me, it was interesting that I discovered both her properly more political, sociological writing, The Origins of Totalitarianism, and The Human Condition at the same time. I mean, what attracted me to The Origins of Totalitarianism, I must admit, was the section on anti-Semitism. And growing up as a Jewish woman in Turkey myself, I mean, I did not encounter the same kinds of discrimination that people in Germany had experienced. But there was something about the way in which she portrayed the cultural and political conditions that led to the emergence of anti-Semitism in Europe that just was extremely, extremely compelling to me. At the more philosophical level, you see, I was already interested in German philosophy, and The Human Condition started pulling together a lot of threads, and in particular, those were the days when we all read Marx, and her critique of Marx in The Human Condition, her distinction between labor, work, and action, and particularly the distinction between labor and work, where at the moment all of us were really talking about.
Tell me more. The distinction between labor and work. I mean, that's one of those things I only half understand. Tell us a little bit more and why that is central to her reaction to totalitarianism.
Yes. Remember the phrase from John Locke in the Second Treatise of Civil Government, where Locke says the labor of our body and the work of our hands. Labor is the constant physical exertion that is part of the life cycle. As human beings, to survive, to go on, we have to clean and eat and produce and basically become part of, like the force of nature ourselves. But work is when the energy that they expend, the activity that we engage in, leaves something tangible. This could be buildings, this could be manuscripts, this could be an artwork, it could be something like an everyday object, but work produces, in Arendt's terms, a world that we can share with others. And here she I'm a laborer. Help me understand the real significance of this, just really briefly. I'm a laborer on an assembly line. And I just do this little thing, hammer this little nail. But the whole group of us produces a car. Is that labor or work or what? I mean, am I laboring, the assembly line worker, or am I working? Yeah. I mean, in any complex human activity, these dimensions, of course, sort of, fall together. In an assembly line, there is also action, being together, with others. Let's say you are a trade union organizer, or you are sort of debating as to, how you should organize the production line, as to how much, you should be able to produce. That would then be also action. Now, when we look at any phenomena in the world, we are going to see, the way philosophers usually tell us, that any complex phenomena can be analytically distinguished into various categories. So something like, work on the assembly line has both the dimension of labor, the gestures that I have to make, the way my body must, perform a certain operation, but it also has the dimension then of work, as well as having, the dimension of action.
We're going to have to dig into this three-part distinction a little bit more after the break. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today, we're discussing the work of Hannah Arendt with Seyla Benhabib from Yale University.
Arendt's philosophy dealt with the big philosophical and political questions that emerged from the catastrophic currents of the 20th century, Nazism, Stalinism, and the Holocaust. Share your thoughts on Hannah Arendt and these big issues. Join us by calling 1-800...
You're listening to an encore presentation of Philosophy Talk. The phone lines are closed.
Political theory and totalitarianism, when Philosophy Talk continues.
I tore my mind on a jagged sky. I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. Yeah, oh yeah, what condition my condition was in.
The Human Condition is one of Arendt's most enduring books, and like all her work, it was shaped directly by political events of the 20th century. Now, all of us really had our lives and thoughts shaped by the highs and mostly the lows of that tumultuous and ghastly century, even if not as dramatically as Arendt. So share your experiences and thoughts as we look back on that century. This is Philosophy Talk, and I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Here's a question for you. How do you conceive of political debate and political space? How do Fox News or PBS or call-in radio work as public space for political discussion in your life? The toll-free number to join us is 1-800...
You're listening to an encore presentation of Philosophy Talk. The phone lines are closed.
Our guest is Seyla Benhabib from Yale University.
So, Seyla, I want to take you back a little bit to this concept of action and public space. You distinguish labor from work, and we got into that a bit, but tell me more about action and public space.
Well, maybe I should also say that Arendt herself named the human condition vita activa, of active life, and it was translated as the human condition. I would say that probably her biggest contribution to philosophy comes from her theorization of this concept of action. It actually seems so ubiquitous, but for her, it is the fundamental way in which we speak and we act. We are together. We reveal who we are in speaking and acting. And she says most of our action is also in the form of speech. In this respect, she's also very close to Wittgenstein, actually, another philosopher of language. But for Arendt, human beings reveal who they are to each other in the public sphere. The public sphere she calls sometimes the space of appearance, the mode in which we are together in acting and speaking.
So totalitarianism really,
right?
This really undermines this whole public sphere. I mean, this is really the worst thing about it, I guess, from her point of view. Absolutely. I mean, she sees totalitarianism as trying to do something in politics that had never been ventured before, namely eliminating the space of spontaneous coming and speaking and acting together, which for her is part of the human condition. So totalitarianism, she says somewhere, is like an iron band. Now imagine a group of human beings and an iron band is thrown around them. And if you pull this band together,
plurality is eliminated, and you try to create one voice, one person.
Right.
But what you do is it's almost like taking the oxygen out of a room, right?
Because you extinguish the conversation in a way. But let me take you back one step. Because you talked about the public space, and I always think of the public in contradistinction from the private. And one might think, is who one is really revealed by one's actions in a public space, or by what one does in the privacy of one's own home and family and all that? I mean, why is identity constituted by the public rather than the private?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is really a key issue. I would say in this respect, I wouldn't agree with Arendt myself, because there is a fundamental way in which we also reveal ourselves in the private. But look, she was a civic Republican in the Aristotelian tradition, the tradition of Machiavelli, Rousseau, Jefferson. For her, human activity had a kind of fundamental value when it was activity not just geared towards personal, private concerns, but activity in the public, whereby we try to create something together, and we aspired for a good that each of us by ourselves would never be able to attain.
Let me just interrupt you. You mentioned Rousseau, and a lot of thinkers think that the roots of totalitarianism go back to this difference between Rousseau and Locke. That Rousseau, with his idea of the joint will of everybody involved in the polity, really set the stage for totalitarianism. Does Arendt share that view of Rousseau?
No, Arendt does not think that Rousseau is a pre-totalitarian thinker, although she is equivocal. I mean, she does not have great praise for Rousseau in one respect. She finds Rousseau's concern with intimacy, which comes across in the Confessions, almost as problematic as the fact that, the social contract, which in some ways is such a fundamental book about freedom and equality and standing under the law, then creates no space for continuous public political participation. So, she gives a very nuanced reading of Rousseau on the one hand as being sort of the philosopher of intimacy, and on the other hand, having really this concept of the public manifesting itself through the general will. But how does the general will express itself? And Arendt there is very much the participatory Democrat, saying the only way in which the general will can express itself is in action, participation, discussion, debate, and deliberation.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about the philosophy of Hannah Arendt, one of the most influential and consequential political philosophers of the 20th century, and we'd like you to join this conversation. 1-800-525...
This is an encore presentation of Philosophy Talk. The phone lines are closed.
Grant in San Francisco. Are you on the line, Grant?
Yes, I am.
Okay, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
My question is this. I'd like your observation. I disagree. I believe that Hannah was famous for the statement of the almost cliche or expression, the banality of evil. And I'm wondering if you would agree or not that George W. Bush, that stands for worst ever, but if he would be a perfect example of that. For example, he supposedly gave up golf. It turned out maybe he really didn't. But, it seems to me, whoever or not I find it difficult to call him evil, and yet it seems like maybe that's the face of it.
Well, Grant, thanks for the question. Seyla, first explain what Arendt meant by the phrase, I think often misunderstood, the banality of evil, and then we'll see if we can apply it to some contemporary cases.
Right. I mean, it's one of her most misunderstood phrases, obviously, and the book out of which it comes.
The books out of which it comes is Eichmann in Jerusalem.
So we seem to be having some technical difficulties.
Ken and I have lost contact with Seyla. I hope our listeners haven't.
So we're talking about the phrase, the banality of evil, John.
You said it was misunderstood. How is it misunderstood?
Well, I'm not quite. I mean, people think it has to do with evil is such an ordinary occurrence, but I think it was all about the sort of whole sort of bureaucratic architecture of evil. Right, and it became such an ordinary, unremarkable guy like Eichmann could participate in this enterprise right? And it just became a kind of matter of course. But it was an ordinary guy. He wasn't particularly, if you look at him, distinguished or distinguishable from anybody else. But the whole bureaucratic architecture of Hitlerism and Nazism kind of helped turn him into this massively.
Yeah, and I suspect we should probably forego Grant's invitation to discuss George Bush in comparison with Eichmann and all that stuff. You'll just have to guess how great a president we think George Bush is. But the Eichmann thing is a bit, I mean, we have this Hannah Arendt coming out of Germany. She's experienced totalitarianism, and as our guest Seyla Benhabib suggested, totalitarianism came as a bit of a surprise to the political theorists of Arendt's generation. They hadn't been prepared for it. It was something new in the world that didn't fit into the established categories of political thought. Retrospectively, some people see it then in Rousseau, but it came as a surprise. And what was it that was so different? And her analysis was that what totalitarianism is that was different from what we'd seen in the world before is it eliminates this public space. It's not that it wins all the arguments, but there's just no room for argument. And so her philosophy then turned to the analysis of argument. What is it to argue? What is it to perform a political argument? What are you trying to do? And the connections between the distinctions between labor and action and work and the importance of public space there were kind of just rooted in her discussion of totalitarianism.
I think Shayla's back with us. Shayla, you there?
Yes, I'm here. At what point did we get interrupted?
Were you hearing us all along? We weren't hearing you. I don't know.
No. I was just going on about the banality of evil.
So explain the banality.
I lost you.
Yeah, and we lost you too. Technical live radio. So explain the banality of evil.
But the most important thing to remember about this phrase, it comes out of the book Eichmann in Jerusalem, is that she did not mean that evil was banal or should not be condemned. But what she meant was that banal or perfectly ordinary people who are neither particularly evil or depraved themselves can get caught in a machinery and perform acts that we would consider evil, or in some ways assist in the performance acts that are evil. And for her, the 20th century, particularly the second half of the 20th century, was therefore such a sort of moral morass,
right,
because it gave rise, to actions and to phenomena of this kind. So banality refers to the psychology. Right. And the moral character of the individuals involved, not to their actions.
So you make one of the characteristics. See if I've got this right. One of the characteristic things about the 20th century states and societies is the massive bureaucratization of everything, right? And you just become an actor in this massive bureaucracy, independently of its means, its aims, right? So you have a massive bureaucracy for exterminating the Jews, and you just take a job as a list maker or something like that, and you just write down the list of the Jews who come, who's going to go to the work camps, and it's just your job.
And I want to emphasize, I'm not saying that there's a real close connection between Eichmann and the current Republican administration or anything like that, but both with in current administrations, the bureaucracy has become big, and when you read these memoirs, you see that people really don't have much space to sit back and discuss and think about what they're doing. They're mostly carrying out actions, dealing with the press, dealing with the United Nations, whatever they do, that are kind of dictated by the bureaucracy.
Right. May I add something? I mean, since we are trying to think about the contemporary situation, I would say that maybe even more than the bureaucracy, if we want to understand what Arendt had in mind with this term, think of something like Abu Ghraib. Okay? Think of what happened there. Think of the soldiers involved, and I always think, to the young woman, last name was Englander, think of what happened there with particularly perfectly ordinary people. But we've all seen the pictures. We've all, we have some understanding of the acts and so on. These were not extermination camps or anything, but there was a degree of moral depravity and humiliation and things that were done to each other, which, were by perfectly, people who are our neighbors, our soldiers, etc. Right. I think that's what she had in mind.
But, okay, so Seyla, there's a little bit of a paradox here, because the rise of totalitarianism in the 20th century also corresponds to the rise of democratic politics and party politics and mass participation. How do these two tendencies live together? I mean, and does Arendt have anything to say about how these two tendencies live together?
Well, I mean, I think that mass democracies for her were a challenge, not because she was an anti-democrat. I mean, I think that sometimes commentators have said that she wasn't particularly fond of democracy, but she was concerned about the tendencies in mass democracies to create uniformity of opinion, to create concern, intensive concern with private life, and to depoliticize. I mean, this is the irony, that mass democracies have both, tendencies to create sort of conformist behavior and at the same time privatization. And, she was in this respect always an activist who emphasized the commitment to the public thing, the civic Republican moment.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking with Seyla Benhabib about the philosophy of Hannah Arendt. You can join this conversation by calling 1-800...
You're listening to an encore presentation of Philosophy Talk. The phone lines are closed.
Once again, we're discussing Hannah Arendt with Seyla Benhabib from Yale University.
We've discussed totalitarianism, how that fits in with Hannah Arendt's concepts of action and labor. In the next section, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to ask, well, how about the internet? Is this going to be a realization of Arendt's concept of a public space, or is it threatened to be just another way under the guise of mass democracy of excluding action of the kind we want? So stay with us, and we'll talk about the internet as public space.
When Philosophy Talk continues.
Hannah Arendt held public space to be a condition of freedom and political action. Does the internet fit this definition? To the extent that it does, can we preserve the internet as a public space, as a 21st century agora or whatever? Tell us what you think. 1-800-525...
This is an encore presentation of Philosophy Talk. The phone lines are closed.
I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor, and our guest is Seyla Benhabib from Yale University. Seyla, I want to preface this discussion of the internet with I want to underline something you said about Hannah Arendt's political philosophy, this distinction between the public and the private. One of her complaints about mass democracy, as you said, is that things that belong in the private sphere and the sphere of intimacy and all that sort of stuff creep out. No, not just creep out, explode out into the public, and that kind of swamps the public space. And she wants to recover this public space. But the internet is a place that just accelerates this trend toward, stuff exploding, stuff otherwise private exploding out into, discussions among individuals who have no connection to each other. I mean, what's going on with that?
Well, it's a new medium. It is changing, our lives. I mean, you can have, Facebook as well as Talking Points memo, I guess, and you have to deal with the new and very mixed reality. I mean, there is no question about this that right now, the internet is an alternative public sphere. It is creating alternative political conversations. It is creating a world of information that is really amazing. I mean, as a scholar, I am now beginning to see more and more articles also in referee journals and in other places that go www.
Right.
And it's become, within 5 years, it's become plausible.
But do you think it's But do you think it's a public space in the sense that Hannah Arendt intended, where we make ourselves manifest this world of appearances? We decide what we're going to do together, how we're going to live together, everybody adopting everybody else's point of view and making themselves known and who they are. I mean, is it a public space in that sense?
It isn't. No, it isn't in that. It isn't in that sense. And there is, of course, in Arendt's model, sociologically, look, she was thinking of the Greek marketplace, or at the most our town halls or public square, right? Her concept of the public was very much maybe architecturally governed by the metaphor of the public square. But when you think about the public also as the medium through which you interact, you communicate, and you said something very important about taking the standpoint of each other. I don't see any reason in why through our internet communication you wouldn't also be able to take the standpoint of the other, broaden your vision, and learn about it. I mean, this I think goes on when people, let's say, in some cases, in China, let's say, if they have access or we can communicate with them, there is a broadening of our vision. I mean, it isn't exactly the agora, and now, on the other hand, there is, of course, the problem of anonymity.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, exactly. And you talk about the world of appearance, very important concept in German philosophy and Hannah Arendt. Of course, the internet gives you another layer of world of appearance. You can be someone on the internet. You can have, as one of the big programs, a second life, and how that's going to bear out. There's also this. There's so many things good about the internet. I mean, I read the Huffington Post and the Drudge Report and go to their bloggers, and it's just a much richer informational environment than when it was kind of, read the New York Times and watch CBS News. But on the other hand, there is this thing that this bureaucratization of going to the internet and finding dirt about John McCain or Obama and putting it out, and very intelligent people are obviously wasting their lives with this kind of creepy work.
And back to the anonymity thing, John, because one of the things about the public space for Arendt was that it's a space in which people disclose to one another their identity, right? But the internet, you can disclose your identity, but you can often not disclose it. So it's not this space of mutual understanding and acceptance, because disclosure is supposed to be preparatory to that, right?
Yes, it is. And I mean, there's one other aspect that we should mention, and which is what distinguishes it also from a, democratic public sphere, and that is fragmentation. I mean, this isn't just, the problem with the internet. This comes in, with channel surfing or maybe even choosing your newspaper, but it's just exaggerated that in some ways the space of communication and information is increasing. In other ways, there is less and less of an obligation for us to share even in a mutually intelligible vocabulary. You see, we can each withdraw into our own little cocoons and balloons and communicate, with each other only in our chat rooms. And this is adding to the fragmentation of the social, which is a problem that our societies right now, are really dealing with.
So let me ask you a question based on that, because in some ways, I really am an admirer of Arendt's philosophy. She writes with such power and such sweep, and it draws so many different things together. But in some ways, I think, gosh, her description of politics, well, as it might be, certainly isn't a description of politics as it is. In some ways, I think it may be archaic, because it doesn't answer to the situation of how do we, divided and as fragmented as we are, live together, right? I mean, it makes this public space in which, I don't know, we abandon the private or something, or shut off the private and engage in this public deliberation, but about what? I'm not quite sure what. And then I just wonder if it's a description of our politics, or a politics that could plausibly become ours. What do you think?
I believe that in every good politics there is a dimension of what Arendt was talking about. Let me frame it this way. I mean, the biggest challenge to her understanding of politics is what we call interest group liberalism.
Right.
Why should we leave interests at home, so to speak? They are part of the public sphere, and, politics is about negotiation. You give some, you take some. It's about power. And this notion of sort of pluralist liberalism, where politics is also like the marketplace, right? She is holding up another picture of the political. Yes, she's a bit of a purist, but she's saying, look, there's also going to be moments in the political where it isn't just about your interest and horse trading, but you are going to have to engage in some vision of the common, and you're going to have to transcend yourselves. You're going to emerge as those civic actors. And I think that politics is not always like that, but it has moments like that.
Yeah, so let me ask you, though, about this private versus public one more time. So how does who I am sort of to my wife and my most intimate connections and within the family sphere and, in the privacy of my study, identity in that sense, right? And even identity in the sense of my ethnic allegiances, right? How does any of that enter into politics for Arendt? Do I just leave that all behind?
No, but it has to be transformed. You don't enter the political sphere as the sort of the bourgeois concerned with his or her own backyard. The political sphere is transformative. It is transformative in the sense that you have to find a language in terms of which to articulate publicly also private concerns. I mean, maybe I'm going to try to translate Arendt here for our times. It isn't as if private concerns have no space in the political. Let's say if you are a mother and you are concerned about product safety for the toys of your children, you can enter the political space when you make this issue into something, let's say, that we should all be concerned about because global capitalism is, putting all these products out there, but we as citizens are not really paying sufficient attention to safety issues. This for Arendt would be completely a political moment, but you have to go through this process of transforming private concerns into public claims.
That makes sense to me. There's a political theory that I sometimes think Arendt kind of anticipated. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. The deliberative democracy folks say, we should get together and deliberate. You should only offer public reasons for any policy decision and deliberate until you reach some kind of consensus. Is she kind of a deliberative democracy person or not?
I think that she certainly anticipated. I mean, I think that we all owe her something in that respect. I mean, she has a very nice phrase. She says, what is the origin of the word interest, right? Interest in Latin comes from the two phrase inter esse, that which is common to us, that which is among us, whereas we understand interest coming out of the more utilitarian Anglo-American tradition as simply what is self-directed, directed towards one. But she's saying, look, inter est is what is inter esse, what is among us, what is between us. So in much of politics, we have to deliberate about what can become common to us, about the world that we can become building common. Very important concept in her world building.
On that note, Seyla, I'm going to thank you for joining us. It's been a very nice conversation, despite the technical difficulties. Our guest has been Seyla Benhabib, professor of political science and philosophy at Yale University, noted author, but for our purposes, author of The Reluctant Modernism of Hannah Arendt. So, John, what did you learn today? Well,
Arendt's a fascinating figure, and reading about Arendt, I mean, from my relatively amateurish picture, I see kind of going back to Locke and Rousseau, an attempt to find something in the middle that's not the general will, which brings with it all the worries about totalitarianism as the only way of reaching agreement. But it's not just interest, let's negotiate either. It's a sense, like you say, deliberative democracy. We have some obligation to think and put ourselves in the position of what's good for the whole. But we don't expect to get anything like a general will.
Yeah, you know what I learned today? That even through technical difficulties, philosophy can shine through. Because, we apologize for the fact that we lost the air for a little bit, but hey, we soldiered on, and philosophy works even when other things don't work, right?
So you can visit our website, philosophytalk.org, where you can also download podcasts of our program. So please go check it out.
John, you believe in safe radio, don't you?
Absolutely.
Well, we're in trouble. We can't go on because I forgot my conundrum.
Oh, luckily we have one on the line now, Ken.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, William.
Hi.
So where are you calling from, William?
I'm calling from the College of Charleston in South Carolina.
Oh, that's a nice
College
place.
of Charleston in South Carolina. Are you a student or a faculty member?
I'm a student, a philosophy major.
Oh, good.
Philosophy major.
Good.
You ever take any classics?
No, not yet, no.
Okay, well, I know a good classics professor down there named Phillips, so you should take a class from him.
But why don't you tell us, what's your conundrum, William?
Well, a large percentage of the student body smoked cigarettes, and I hate smoke, and I inhale it whenever I go walk to class.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty much unavoidable. I have spoken to the president at a student body government meeting, and I have emailed him persuading him to do something about the smoking issue. I have also spoken to the dean of students and the head of health services, and they have told me that the school cannot discriminate against smokers. Public safety has the right to fine people, but they've chosen not to.
Well, this is South Carolina. Is that still a tobacco economy down there?
It is pretty large, yeah.
Yeah. So, you're probably barking up the wrong tree if you think you would ever ban smoking altogether.
Let me ask you this. How do you feel about smokers? I mean, just quite apart from what they're doing to your lungs, how do you feel about them? Do you feel they're kind of irrational?
Totally. I think that they're wasting their money on things that are bad for the environment, bad for their health, and bad for other people.
So suppose you weren't even on campus, but you had the president's ear. Would you still encourage him to totally ban smoking for the good of those students?
Certainly.
Do you think that there's a little bit of paternalism or control involved in those kinds of attitudes? I mean, what I'm asking is, to what extent are you really outraged by the increase in probability that you'll get lung cancer, and to what extent are you just outraged at the whole culture of people who smoke, ruin their own health, and don't care about the environment?
Well, yeah, my health is very important to me, but I also have come to think that in this day and age, with all the awareness that has been brought about by the effects that smoking can cause, that I think people really should now really say, you know what, smoking is really bad for people.
So I don't like smoking. I don't like smoke. So I agree with you in your condemnation of smoking as a habit, of the industry that produces this thing, of the government that allows it to go on. I think it should be. I mean, if I were a public policy maker, I would basically tax it out of existence. But you know what? I think free, autonomous people have a right to do things that are bad for them and that other people don't like. Now, sometimes there are these, what economists call externalities, right? Where if I'm pumping pollutants into the air, everybody has to pay the cost of that. And that seems wrong. So the polluter should have to be taxed to recover the cost of these externalities. So I think that's all right with smoking. All right with smoking. Tax it out of existence.
One thing I could do is tell you what it was like when I was in graduate school, and people used to smoke these double cigars twisted together and soaked in rum in the seminars, so that, lung cancer wasn't your problem at all. It was a blinding headache. But I won't bore you with that. So here's my advice, William. First, you need to really be philosophical about this, since you're a philosophy major, and try to separate your different motives. If you're really just interested about your health, then I think get one of those masks to wear as you go from class to class. Seriously. People do that in Japan. They do it in lots of places. It makes a lot of good sense. And don't worry about the behavior of others.
But wait a minute, John. John, wait a minute.
But a large part of philosophy is control what you control. And
I know,
don't try
I
to
agree.
control other
I agree,
things.
but there's something morally objectionable about a universe in which people are allowed to make the shared environment such that other people have to wear a mask because of their habit.
I know, but I'm talking about, yes, there's something morally objectionable about a universe. Let's analyze that statement, right? You do a lot of things in life because other people don't behave perfectly. Then, to the extent that your concern is the environment, I doubt if smoking's the thing to worry about. To the extent that your concern is about the health of the other students, you're probably going to have more success in a non-coercive way to educate them, and I'm sure there's plenty of room for it.
Right.
So I would say separate your motives and don't glom them all together, and then take appropriate action for each.
So you feel resolved? You feel enlightened?
Yeah, maybe I'll just apply to Stanford for my master's.
There you go.
That's a spirit.
Okay, so nice talking to you, William. Good luck. If you have a philosophical problem or quandary that's affecting your work or your play or keeping you awake at night, John and I would be happy to lend an ear and maybe give you some sound advice.
Go to the Philosophy Talk website and poke the conundrums button with your mouse, or just send an email to conundrums@philosophytalk.org. Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University, copyright 2008.
Our executive producer is David Demarest.
Our production coordinator is Devin Strolovich. Daniel Elstein is our director of research. Lael Weiss is our webmaster. Also thanks to Zoe Corneli, Merle Kessler, Corey Goldman, and Mark Stone.
Philosophy Talk is sponsored in part by Powell's City of Books on the web at powells.com. Support also comes from the Templeton Foundation.
And from various groups at Stanford University, the Friends of Philosophy Talk, and the members of KALW San Francisco, where our program originates.
The views expressed or misexpressed in this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders.
The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
Perhaps just for today you will allow me to smoke immediately.